Welcome to the Inner Scoreboard. I'm Paul Brown, the psychotherapist, a coach, and a lifelong student of performance, pressure, and identity. We just wrapped up spring tryouts around here, so I'm going to do a special post-tryout series. Today, in part one, I'm going to spend some time talking about my own experiences inside tryouts this year, as a coach, as an evaluator, a parent, and someone who works in athlete mental health. Tryouts are really complicated. So they're exciting, stressful, emotional, rewarding, draining, sometimes inspiring, and sometimes heartbreaking. The reality is, most people only see one side of the process. Players experience the pressure of performing, parents experience the uncertainty and emotion, coaches experience the responsibility of building a team while making difficult decisions that impact kids and families, sometimes friendships. And evaluators are trying to be fair while knowing every opinion that they give carries weight. Add in open borders, players trying out multiple centers, and the ripple effects of all of that, and that creates more complications. In this episode, I want to pull the curtain back a bit. I want to talk about what coaches are actually looking for at tryouts, the emotional reality of evaluations, the impact of players trying out multiple centers, and especially if they have no intention in staying in a particular center. Why getting released is not a definition of your worth or your future. And what I think players, parents, coaches all need to better understand about this process. So whether you're a player, a coach, a parent, an evaluator, or someone who just survived the tryout season, this episode is for you. Let's get started. When I first thought of doing this episode, I have to admit I was still running pretty hot from some of my own tryout experiences this spring. I suggested the areas that I wanted to cover to someone, and the first response I got back was, don't make it a rant session. So I'm going to try to balance my different lenses here and hope to bring some honesty, some perspective, and maybe a little more empathy to one of the most emotionally charged experiences in youth sports. So my roles this year, I had my first role above anything was to be a parent. I had two boys that were involved in tryouts this year. I'm also a coach. I've got the U15A team for next year. I'm a former executive member for the local association, so I was the vice president of rep hockey for a few years, and I'm going to be rolling into vice president of operations for next season. So as part of that, I was helping kind of update the website in behind the scenes and had some exposure behind the scenes of what was happening. I'm also a psychotherapist who works in athlete mental health. So I'm going to try and bring all of those perspectives together in one place as we have this conversation. For me, I always say tryouts suck. Plain and simple, they suck. And they suck for everyone. For players, for parents, for coaches, and for people on the executive. It is not a fun experience for most people. I don't know anyone who gets excited about going to tryouts. And certainly during the tryouts, there's quite a bit of tension and emotion in the arenas. I joked with someone this year, but you go to a hockey game at any other time of the year and the crowd is usually pretty loud. They're pretty excited. They're into the game. But at tryouts, especially if it's an inner squad, it's so quiet in the arena. Nobody wants to make a sound because everyone feels that they're being evaluated and assessed in the moment. This spring gave me a different perspective in a few areas. So I could maybe just talk about as an evaluator to start off with. So I helped evaluate several different teams. I helped evaluate in AA for a couple of teams and in single A for a couple of teams. And that was quite an interesting experience because for me, in some of the teams I knew players and other ones I didn't. So when I go into an evaluation as an evaluator, first thing I want to do is I want to ask who's the coach's kid, because I don't want to be evaluating that person. So whether they're a rock star or they're someone who's really weak, I'm not going to evaluate that player. And I'm sharing this as my experience as an evaluator, not everyone's. I did have an experience once several years ago when I I told a coach that a certain player should be released, and they told me that was their child. So life experience there that I don't evaluate the coach's kid anymore. So that's one of the things that I do. I also prefer it when coaches just give me a list of numbers that they're looking at, or give me a blank sheet and tell me who to just pick people that either stand out as being the weakest players on the ice or the strongest players on the ice. So for me, I also bring my own evaluation sheet that I use. I like where I write down the numbers of specific players, and then I write comments beside them. I'll make comments about, how they skate. I'll make comments about maybe how they interact between drills, if it's drills that are being assessed. If I see big errors, I might comment on that or make an X beside their name. If they've done something that's really great, I might make a comment or put a check mark beside their name. So for me as an evaluator, those are some of the things that I would do for other teams, and offer feedback to the coaches afterwards of the certain things that I saw. The prime example this year is I helped evaluate for a team, and there was a player who wasn't really being looked at, wasn't really being considered, and I made some comments about their level of compete. I'd also worked with this player a bit in the past, so I kind of knew a little bit about their character and about what they were bringing to games, and maybe how they had evolved since this coach had seen them in the past. So you're able to bring in some of that insight as well about that specific player. And sometimes coaches can find that really, really helpful. And other times they've made up their decision before tryouts have even started. And it's going to be really hard to shift those positions. For me, because of the amount of hours I spent at the arenas doing evaluations towards the end, it became really exhausting. So I'm excited to help coaches out at the beginning of tryouts, but by the end, when you're spending 4 or 5, 6 hours a night at the arena doing evaluations, by the end, it gets pretty exhausting and you just kind of want to get out of there. So that can actually have an impact on who you're assessing or how detailed your notes are going to be. I still try to, bring everything I can to that process to provide the best feedback I can and the most detailed feedback I can. But by the end, you do start to experience tryout fatigue. Behind the scenes, coaches give you a sense of what they're looking for beforehand in terms of the style of play that they're looking for, whether they're looking for big, strong players or faster players, different characteristics they're looking for, and if there's qualities that are kind of a hard no for them, they should typically let you know that as well, so you have an idea of what you're looking for when you're going in. Really important that different evaluators, different coaches are looking for different things. Different evaluators see different things. So I could be watching a play and have another evaluator right beside me, and we see very different things come out of that play. So I might see a player who goes into a corner and works really, really hard in that battle and maybe delayed puck movement for a little bit so that other people could come in and help out, or allowed for a line change, whatever the case may be. And someone else might look at it and say, well, they went into the corner and they lost the battle. So there's different things that people are looking for in different scenarios. So that's why I feel it's important to actually put some notes down. And I also think that same example holds true for parents. What you see in the stands is not necessarily the exact same as what the coaches are seeing or what they're evaluating or assessing in the moment. Different coaches are looking for different things. And just because you think that your child is the best skater, they might already have 4 or 5 really strong skaters and they're looking for a different quality. For me this year, when I got towards the end of my tryouts, I had players that came out that were really strong forwards. I already had more forwards than I needed on my roster. So what I was really looking for was someone who could come out and play really strong defense. So they may not have been the best skater, but they played the position well. So they may have bumped out someone that was, maybe better in terms of, straight line speed or edges or something. So we're looking for different things to fill different gaps in our team. Being an evaluator, having multiple evaluators is really, really important to have in the tryout season for a couple reasons. One is sometimes there's questions after a player gets released, and you want to be able to say, well, I had multiple evaluators who looked at this tryout and were able to provide information on that. As a coach, if you don't have multiple evaluators and multiple opinions, you're going to have a hard time maybe justifying some of your decisions. So I think it's important to have a lot of different evaluators and get input from different people. And when I mentioned earlier about not having names given to evaluators, that separates relationships from decisions. So those evaluators, they are just looking at what's happening on the ice. If they have a bit of information about a specific player, they can share that in terms of, hey, I know that family, they're a really good family, or that kid's going to work really hard for you. Or, hey, I'm telling you right now that those parents, they're a weapon and you're probably not going to want them on your in your parent group. That stuff is valuable information, and the coaches and the evaluators do share that. And what's really important to know is that as much as tryouts are 1 week, you got to think about the long game. So if your player gets released from tryouts, that nasty email you send after, or if you start shit talking the coach, that is going to get back to the people that are making decisions, and it's going to impact your players' chances in future years. So you have to play the long game. You can be upset, but in the moment, reacting is probably one of the worst things you can do. You need to honor that 24-hour rule before asking for feedback, before you offer any feedback, whether it's to parents or if you're a parent offering feedback to the coach. My best advice is to just delay your response a bit so you can compose yourself, because your reactions have long-term consequences, and it could impact things in future years. So I mentioned before that different coaches are looking for different things. So what exactly are they evaluating at tryouts? So selecting a U10 team is very different than selecting a U15 team or a U18 team. Coaches are looking for different things at different age groups and across different levels, whether it's single A versus triple A. And they might have different philosophies. So one coach at, say, U15 might be looking for a team that's really, really fast, a lot of great skill, a lot of good puck movement. And another coach might be looking for a big team that can bang in the corners and maybe high compete, those types of things. So different coaches are looking for different things. For example, in my tryouts, I had an exhibition game where I had players that in the first 2 periods went out and were demonstrating a lot of individual skill. That's great. I like to see that individual skill, but I'm actually more interested for me in terms of that team aspect, putting the team as a priority. The team is more important than the individual. And I want to see things like puck movement. I want to see things like, what is a player like on the bench, not just, can they skate fast? So for us, second intermission, we had a flood. So I went into the change room and said, hey, you're doing great. What I really want to see is people start to move the puck. So in the third period, I was actually looking at the differences of people that were trying to skate the puck end to end compared to those that got the puck out and made passes. So that helped me to determine in those moments, okay, this player might be coachable. I might be able to get some information through to them. And that goes a long way as coachability. Can these players adapt to what the coaches are saying? Or are they set in their ways? Or are they getting messages from parents or other people at home that tell them that they need to, ignore the coach and play a certain way? So coachability is a really big aspect that we're looking for when we're trying to do evaluations and tryouts. We're looking at consistency. So if you get multiple tryouts, are you able to perform at a high level multiple tryouts in a row? Or are you great one day and not so great another day? So consistency has a real impact on whether or not you're going to make a team. And it's really important to recognize that consistency is not just assessed during that week of tryouts. They may have been looking at you even before tryouts to know, do you consistently perform? Communication. Are you talking to your teammates? Are you respectful to the coaches and the evaluators when you see them in the arena? Remember, as coaches and evaluators, we're floating around the arena before and after ice. So we're seeing the interactions between people. When you sign up, you check in for your tryout. Do you look the coach in their eye and shake their hand and introduce yourself? Are you doing it as a player, or are you having your parents do it? To me, that goes a long way. Even when I coached U10 and U11, I would ask players to check in. I didn't want the parents to check in because I want to get a sense of what the actual player is like. We're looking at emotional regulation. So things happen if you're in an exhibition game and someone maybe gives you a chop. Do you retaliate or do you skate away? Do you kind of clear the front of the net after a whistle to make sure people aren't going at your goalie? Okay, that might be a good thing. But after that, once the dust settles, are you skating away or are you punching people in the head? So we're looking at that kind of emotional regulation. Do you give up once you make a mistake? Are you slamming your stick on the ice? Or do you just go at the next shift and compete hard? So having a sense of what your emotions are going to be like going from, one shift to the next has a huge impact because you're going to stand out. If you make mistakes, coaches often will see those, but it's how you respond to that that's important. Competitiveness. Are you floating around and just letting other people do the work and you're waiting for the puck to come to you? Or are you creating opportunities? Are you going into the corner and battling? Are you finding open ice to receive a pass? Are you back checking really hard? So what's that level of compete? Because even if your skill isn't there, if you have high compete, coaches are going to be more inclined to want you on their team. We can teach some of the skills and drills, but that drive to compete, to want to be better, that's internal to you. That's not about the coaches. That's not about the parents. That's you. And we want to see that you can compete. The one thing that I also want to address with respect to tryouts is we have different opportunities. So if I've known a player for several years, I'm not likely to just use that 1 week of data that I'm picking up from tryouts. So I know that if a player doesn't have a great tryout, I still know who they are. I still know what their compete is like on a regular basis. I still know what they're going to provide to the team. At the same time, if somebody has a spectacular tryout, maybe I look at that and I say, okay, well, the pressure is on because it's tryouts and this person has really stepped up. So maybe there's something there that I can tap into that I haven't in the past. So we're using tryouts as a measurement, but it's not the only measurement. We should use all of the data. I do know some coaches that look exclusively at tryouts, or maybe they'll say they've made their decision fully beforehand. So I might make a comment that says that player is on the outside looking in before tryouts. So they really are going to have to use tryouts to earn their spot again. Or I might say that they're on the inside looking out, which says, yes, I'm pretty confident that I'm going to pick them again, unless somebody comes along and shows me something different that really blows them out of the water. So some of those decisions have kind of been primed before tryouts, and that's really important for you to recognize as well. I had one of my older boys, he went to a tryout, and I feel very confident that he was actually cut before tryouts even started. But he got a few skates in. They gave him an opportunity to prove that he could earn a spot back. Unfortunately, he didn't do that, but there's a life lesson in that. So we take that and we move on. I hear it a lot when parents, and it is mostly parents, that say, well, there's politics in hockey when you're trying to pick a team. And I kind of wonder, like, what does that mean? What does it mean when there's politics in hockey? So is it I'm picking my friend's kid just because they're my friend's kid? Okay, I could kind of see that as maybe being politics. But I also think that sometimes parents use that as an excuse as to why their player didn't get picked. And they look at it from a perspective of, well, you like that family better than our family, or you chose somebody else because my kid has a wonky skating style. That's not politics. That's skating style. That's something that a coach is actually evaluating. So if we're looking at actual skills and attributes, that's not politics. Yes, there are situations when coaches will pick people they know because they like their family or, it's their buddy's kid. That happens less than you might think. So I think that more often than not, coaches are picking based on the talent that's on the ice and the people in general. The one thing about that we look at tryouts is sometimes players get missed, and they might get missed because they're not flashy. They didn't do anything that was, a stellar performance in tryout, or maybe they didn't make any huge mistakes. Those are actually quality players to have on a team, but sometimes we miss them because they didn't do anything that stood out. So that's unfortunate. And that's where it really comes down to looking at players that have you do have more data on, or you're asking more questions about what are they like. Are they a really consistent player? Or are they someone who could maybe they have huge fluctuations that sometimes they're an incredible player and other times they're absolutely invisible and make big mistakes that cost us games. I would rather have someone who's kind of steady, consistent, reliable than someone who's going to be all over the map in terms of their performance. Other thing that evaluators are looking for is how players respond to adversity. So I had a player in this set of tryouts that he suffered an injury. So I coached U15A going into next season, and this player suffered an injury in the first AA tryout. So they did what they could, then they had to leave, came back for the second AA tryout, still couldn't perform at 100%. They were released. They came to the single A tryouts, missed because of injury, and then when they came back, they re-aggravated the injury. So the question was, do they come and skate the next skate, or do they take the night off? I already have enough data on this player to know what they're like from the last year in terms of their performance on the ice, but there was a real opportunity for this player to demonstrate character. And what they did, this was their decision. So this is a 14-year-old youth who made this decision that they were going to come out and skate. And if they needed a break, they would tell the coaches and they would take that break. So the bench staff was informed. They went out on the ice. They needed breaks. They took shifts off. They told the coaches. But when they were on the bench taking those shifts off, instead of giving up and sitting down and feeling sorry for themselves, they were up talking to their teammates, encouraging their teammates, and having conversation. So that's an opportunity to demonstrate character and to demonstrate how you respond to adversity, which coaches are really, really looking for in those situations. One of the things in Ontario that we need to take into consideration is open borders. So in 2025, OHF implemented the policy that players could try out wherever they wanted. So one of the benefits of this was it created more opportunities for players and for teams because you had access to more players. It created more competition for spots, better player movement. So families were able to decide what team they wanted to play for and wanted to try out for, and they could choose that. And so it gave them options as well. Now, some of the challenges that came along with that was instability. So a lot of players were displaced last year. So we had kids that came from other centers and flooded our organization. So local kids were then displaced to go to find other spots wherever they were chasing rep spots in different associations. And then this year, what happened was some of those players didn't come back for tryouts. So they returned to other centers. And then others, certain centers are scrambling to try and find people. So it's really created a bit of a mess in terms of no predictability of who's coming or how many are coming. So it makes it challenging to plan for your tryouts and what's going to happen. This really creates difficulty in terms of planning your roster and in terms of commitment, right? People are not coming to a specific center to be a part of that organization. So they're going to chase the A, right? So I played double A in this center one year, so I'm going to go and chase the A at another center next year if I get released. So there isn't really a sense of loyalty or being committed to a brand or committed to a community or committed to an association. So the association I'm with, there's a really proud heritage and tradition there that people have really wanted to have that logo on their chest. Now we're seeing that shift because they're just going to chase that A. So there's not a lot of commitment from town to town. And one thing that's really created some struggles was when Open Borders first was announced, there was supposed to be a moratorium that associations were not going to be able to add new teams. What ended up happening? So for the most part, that last year, associations did not add new teams, but this year there was a whole bunch of associations that added new teams. So then players were going back to other centers because all of a sudden new teams, and then other associations, their groups, their numbers are being wiped out. So it created a bit of a challenge, and they did not hold true to the 3-year moratorium of not adding teams. Now, I'm not on the inside. I wasn't part of any of the OHF discussions in the last year, so I might not have all my facts straight on that, but I can tell you locally that there's other centers that added teams in every single age group, and some of them added 2 teams. So that really impacted other associations. The thing that became the most challenging this season, tryout season with Open Borders, was players declining offers. So they're trying out multiple centers, and because of the timing, right? So AAA goes first, then AA, then single A, and then the B centers, they start their tryouts. And players that were using some of those skates to get more ice time to prepare for their own tryouts. And I totally get trying to get extra ice in. Where it became a real issue was players were holding teams hostage, essentially, or getting offered spots and then declining it. And simply because they wanted to go back to another center. I totally get wanting to go back to another center. However, why would you stay until a spot is offered and then go back to the other center? Because what ends up happening in those situations is there's an impact on other players and other families. So if I offer you a spot, I've likely released somebody else who was fighting for that spot. So that player that's been released has to deal with all the emotional consequences of that release. So whatever heartache they're feeling and whatever disappointment they're feeling, their parents are having to deal with that at home. And then that spot wasn't actually gone. The challenge then becomes now there's a vacant spot on the team, and the coaches have to call those players back and basically say, "Oh, just kidding. You're not released. I put you through the ringer for absolutely no reason because I'm actually going to offer you a spot now because you're the 16th skater, or you were the 16th skater, now you're the 15th." And I think those players, at that point, they might tell that coach to beat it. You cut me. You don't want me here. I'm not playing for you. I'm not going to be your backup plan. So that's one option. So then the coach is left with a short roster because of other parents being selfish and not being honest about what their intentions are. So it does create a ripple effect. That player who's reoffered the spot also has an opportunity in front of them that they can prove that coach made the wrong decision the first time. So there is maybe a bit of an upside in terms of that player gets another chance, but it can be a really challenging situation. So I would encourage parents, if you have any kind of a relationship with the coach, to say to them, "Listen, we're just here for some extra skates. If you're going to get one skate anyway at that level. Maybe if you can keep me for a couple, that'd be helpful. If not, I get it." I don't know if there's a perfect solution to open borders or what it might be, but I think we need to look at it a little more closely because it had significant consequences last year in one direction, and this year it's having significant consequences in another direction. And I know that declining offers happened on multiple teams and multiple age groups. I heard of older kids were saying, well, I'm holding out to see if I get an offer with this team at a different level, which means that coach is going to have to hold the spot for 2, 3 weeks. And that's just not reasonable for a coach to do that. You're going to let that spot go. You're going to bring someone else in. When we talk about the emotions of tryouts, the emotional side of tryouts, a lot of people, a lot of players, and a lot of parents kind of attach their identity to the team that they land on. So if I have played double A hockey my whole career, then I identify as a double A hockey player. So if I get released from that team, then I'm stuck in this position of who am I if I'm not a double A hockey player? I think if we peel that label back, you're still a hockey player, right? You're still someone who plays hockey. It doesn't have the level doesn't have to be your identity. And this happens with the parents as well. And this is where we get into chasing A's and the different associations on the different levels because they identify with my child plays double A hockey. My child plays triple A. My child plays plays rep, whatever the category is. And us as parents, we get connected to that label as well. And sometimes we're a little bit timid to say, whatever that level of A is, if it's not the highest level. It doesn't define who you are as a person, right? They play hockey. They're a kid, or maybe they play rep hockey, right? And I think that that is a more important thing to focus on than whatever that specific level is. We attach too much value to the A's and don't focus enough on the experience. You might have someone, I could tell you of associations around here, they've got double A teams, they get pumped every year. And so is it that important to wear that second A, or would you rather be on a team that's competitive at a lower level and have more fun? Because losing every week sucks, right? Nobody wants to get, pounded by double digit goals on the regular. So give thought to, why are you choosing to go to different centers and what does that actually mean to you? What value does that have to you? What meaning does it have to you as a person or to your child and to their long-term development? Sometimes when players get released, there is that feeling of embarrassment. So they don't want to face their friends because they've had this comparison of of having played at a certain level for a long time. And then now they're not there. So they feel embarrassed that they've lost something. And, we catastrophize those outcomes. And there are some realities that it does create a learning opportunity for children. Through adversity comes another chance at success. And I think it's a learning opportunity for us as parents to have those conversations with our parents about what it truly means and what opportunities are out there. Now, I'm not suggesting that on the morning that a child gets released that you're saying it's okay, you can still do whatever. We need to be there to validate their feelings and let them feel those feelings. That's our role as a parent in those moments. They've been cut, they're devastated. They don't know what that means for them. Allow them to have those feelings in that moment before we start to help them pick up those pieces. So I think that it's important that we have some of that reality and that balance in our approach. Confidence can become very fragile during the tryout season, and we have to make sure that we do our part to remind kids that hockey, whatever that level is, it's not all of who they are, that there are other aspects of them. For players, when you're going through your tryouts, my suggestion is be who you are. If you're a gritty player who goes into corners and battles, then in tryouts, be a gritty player who goes into corners and battles. Don't try to be a finesse player. Don't be someone who's going to try and dangle four players because that's not your style. You're likely going to lose the puck and it's going to look worse for you. If you're a finesse guy or girl, then who has some good hands, show those good hands. It's probably not in your best interest to go and try and muck it up in front of the net if that's not your style of play. I would suggest that most coaches would like to see us still be competitive and still show some grit to get along the boards when needed. So if you're avoiding contact altogether, most coaches are going to look down on that. But having said that, be the style of player that you are and show that you're capable of change if necessary. But stick to the things that you do well and try and show those off in tryouts. Stay emotionally steady. So if you make a mistake, that's okay. Mistakes happen. Players are not going to make a team or be released from a team based on one play only. At the very least, you're going to get a full skate and get looked at there. So if you make a mistake, shake it off. You have to move on to the next rep, the next shift, whatever, next shot, next save, whatever it is. Focus on what's about to happen and what's happening now, and you have to let that past go. You have to exercise a really effective short-term memory when you're in the tryout, in the games or in the practices. Compete instead of trying to impress. This goes back to what I just said about go in there and battle for pucks, right? Win those puck races, skate as fast as you can when you need to, but stay true to the type of player that you are. Your path is not defined by one team, right? It's going to be defined by the things that you contribute and that you bring to every tryout, every practice, and every game. And the goal is to keep developing. It's not just about winning that specific tryout. For parents, as I mentioned, for your players, maybe I'll go back actually and talk about the lead up to tryouts. As parents, we tend to put a lot of pressure on our kids, but well, you've got to get ready for tryouts. You have to do this thing, and that creates a lot of pressure on them. Now, I do think it's helpful to provide them with some guidance and maybe some reminders. Hey, tryouts are coming up in X number of weeks or X number of months. I haven't seen you, go for a run. I haven't seen you practice your shots. I haven't seen you do any workouts. Just giving you a reminder, your call, your decision. And you have to make that age appropriate, but it's not really on us to drive to force the children to do those things. They need to be internally motivated or there will be no change. We can remind them, right? So that's the external motivation as a reminder, but we can't constantly be on them and nagging them or they're going to actually stop doing the thing. They're not going to want to do it anymore. So then we end up getting in the way. So provide some reminders. Don't be too aggressive in how you're reminding them. The car ride conversation. So after a tryout, asking them, hey, how do you think you did today? Maybe you expand on what's one thing you did well, what's one thing you need to work on, or you could have done better today. Keep it simple. They don't need to be coached on the way home from the tryout. They just need you to be a parent. Be there for them emotionally and let them know, maybe give them some confidence or some reassurances of things that they did well, but just be a parent. Don't tell them, oh, you should have done this, you should have done that. I find it really interesting when, I sit in the arena at tryouts and I hear parents talking, and in the skate itself, the parents are complaining, oh, I wish my player did this. Oh, they should have passed. Oh, they should have skated. Why didn't they shoot there? Oh, I can't believe they did all that things. And then the parents leave and they're frustrated and they're angry with their child's performance. And then when the player gets released, they're all pissed off and they can't understand why. So you got to kind of pick a lane there, right? If you're going to be so disappointed in your child's performance, maybe you should expect that they're going to get released. And regardless of the outcome, you got to be a parent before anything and support their child with what's happened, because their emotions in those moments far exceed your emotions, right? And they need to be comforted more than we do. And they should not ever feel responsible for our emotions as parents. So being supportive if there is any disappointment, and not tying their identity to the level of hockey that they play. So we touched on this already, right? Whether they play single A or double A, who gives a shit? They play hockey, let them be happy, let them have fun. Let them learn, let them develop. And avoiding comparing them to other players. So, well, little Johnny made the team. Little Johnny made that pass or would have made that pass. That's not helping. Our role is to support players through those experiences, to support our kids. They're not players in that moment, they're our children. So, there's no perfect system for tryout. There's no like tryouts suck for everybody. They suck for parents, players, coaches, evaluators. It's a terrible experience to go through, and it actually creates valuable life lessons. It reminds us, that if we work really hard, we can sometimes reach our goals. It also teaches us that if we work really hard, sometimes we don't reach our goals. Sometimes there's somebody who's better at that skill, and sometimes people are looking for something different than what we have to offer. It's like going for a job interview. I can have all the skill in the world, but I just might not be the right person for that company, and I don't get the job. A tryout is exactly the same thing. I think that we have to remember that, different people are carrying pressure in different ways. I believe that parents should be respectful of coaches and what they're going through and trying to pick a team. They're not picking it based just on what's on the ice. They're trying to establish a culture. They're trying to establish a room of relationships that everyone's going to be together for a year. And that's not an easy feat. There's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure associated with creating the right team, especially knowing that you're probably going to hurt some feelings of some children when they get released, because not everyone is going to make the team. And that's a heavy burden for coaches to carry, knowing that you are going to upset children by decisions that you make. The other thing is, I think coaches also need to do a better job of communicating with parents, kind of what their expectations are, what their plans are. Parents deserve some sense of transparency, and so do the players, because they are very much invested emotionally in this process and also have goals of where they're going to land next season. And that depends a lot on the children, but the parents, if you're a weapon, you're probably going to be a parent cut, and that impacts your child. And I'm going to tell you that that's not just during the week of tryouts or the week after tryouts. That's the whole season long. So the best thing you can do is be in the crowd, cheering everybody on, saying positive things about the players, the things that they've done. Provide feedback to the coaches, but do it in a constructive way if it's negative, because that's going to go further to help your child go further in their hockey career. If you are, gossiping in the background, or you're being really aggressive in the stands, or saying a lot of negative stuff about the coaches, you're not making that team next year. So I think that's important for people to know. I think coaches need to be clear on what their expectations are, who they're trying to pick, and what qualities they're looking for. And I think that we have to always remember that rejection is not, it's not a destiny, right? It's part of the process. It's part of learning. It's part of development. And it's what you do with that after the fact, right? Is it failing? Is it failure? Or are we quitting after that? Do we take that and move forward and find ways to use that as a strength to develop? Down the road, people are not going to likely remember an individual tryout. They're not going to remember whether they made every team or got cut from every team. I know I got cut from teams as a kid. I know I made teams as a kid, but I can't tell you specifically which ones they were. But I can tell you that when I got cut, I know how I handled that situation. I can remember that. And when I made teams, I know how I handled those situations. So those are the lessons that we're trying to help children process. I guess we're trying to help parents process, and we're trying to help coaches as well. Thanks for taking the time to listen today. Maybe it was a bit of a rant, I'm not quite sure, but it was just my experience this year and some lessons that I pulled out that I wanted to share with everyone. If there's one thing that you take away from today's conversation, I hope it's this. Tryouts are evaluations of performance in the moment. They're not evaluations of a person's value. They're not evaluations of a person's performance. They're evaluations of performance in the moment. They're not evaluations of a person's value. They're not evaluations of a person's performance in the moment. They're not evaluations of a person's value. They're not evaluations of a person's performance in the moment. They're not evaluations of a person's value. They're not evaluations of a person's performance in the moment. They're not evaluations of a person's value. They're not evaluations of a person's performance in the moment. They're not evaluations of a person's value. They're not evaluations of a person's performance in the moment. They're not evaluations of a person's value. They're not evaluations of a person's performance in the moment. They're not evaluations of a person's value. They're not evaluations of a person's performance in the moment. They're not evaluations of a person's value. They're not evaluations of a person's performance in the moment. They're their character, or their long-term potential. Some players will make teams and they're going to thrive. Some players will make teams and they're going to struggle. Some are going to get cut and come back stronger, and some simply need a different environment, different timing, or a different path. Maybe they make a decision that this is not the sport for them, and that's okay too. Everyone's got their own path and they're going to respond to tryouts in a different way. To the players listening, your identity cannot be tied to the level that you make or the jersey that you are playing for. Yes, it's great to be connected with a certain organization or a certain logo on your chest or a certain level of hockey, but that does not define who you are. To the parents, your child needs support, not analysis. You're not their coach, you're their parent. Support them, help them, guide them. We don't want to put extra pressure on them, and we certainly do not want them to feel responsible for our happiness. Whether they make a team or not, they're still your child. You still love them, and you should tell them that. To coaches and evaluators, never forget the weight that our words and decisions can carry. There are people that are impacted by our selections and our words, whether they make teams or don't make teams. It impacts relationships, so friendships of children, friendships of parents. So keep that in mind when you're making your decisions and having your conversations. Hold true to your decision. If you decide you're releasing a player, they can call you and request that you change your mind. Hold true to your decision. You made it for a reason, but be gentle in how you approach it because people are dealing with their emotions. For both sides, all the people involved, remember the 24-hour rule. Sometimes a coach will give you a heads up, say, hey, I'm just letting you know I'm going to release your player. Want to let you know before you find out through another way. Wait 24 hours before you react and start messaging because it's only going to hurt you in the long run. In part 2, I'm going to be sitting down with a coach, a player, and a parent, all from different teams, and we're going to continue this conversation with 3 very different perspectives. I think it's going to be a really valuable discussion. If this issue resonated with you, feel free to share it with a teammate, a parent, coach, or an organization that you might find they get some benefit from this conversation. You can follow for future episodes on confidence, performance, identity, leadership, and the mental side of sport. If you have questions or suggestions for a future podcast, connect with me on Instagram at Paul Brown Coaching, or you can reach out through my website, paulbrowncoaching.com. Thanks for listening, and remember, progress, not perfection.